I wish that I had heard what Gordon and Mark shared when I was 21 years old. In entering my military career and spending almost 37 years related to that, but as workplace people in this room and as people who may be in ministry of clergy or a parachurch ministry, we respect and love both the worker, but sometimes we don't respect the work. But we've gathered here, and here at Cape Town is a first in the history of Lausanne. In Manila in '89, we had approximately 40 business and marketplace people. Here we have 400, the first time in mission history of a gathering like this. And that is to be applauded, that is to be encouraged. I think so. A guiding verse for me has been 1 Thessalonians 4:11 and 12. It says, "Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business and to work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders and so that you will not be dependent on anyone." That's guided the way that I think of my witness in the marketplace. A week ago yesterday, I called Ford Madison, who is nearing age 80. He was the marketplace keynoter, and so to speak, in Manila. And he did something very bold, which I asked him if I could do in this Congress. And he took a poll and asked 3 questions. And I'm going to ask those right now. How many of you came to personal faith in Jesus Christ in a mass evangelistic crusade or in some large event of an evangelistic nature? Would you stand? Okay. Thank you. Number of you, 20 or so of you. The second is, how many of you were led to faith by a pastor, a missionary, or someone just inside your church, a pastor or a missionary or a full-time Christian worker? Would you stand? Okay, thank you. How many of you now were led to Christ by a friend, a family member, or someone close to you in your workplace or your neighborhood? Would you stand? Precisely the same thing happened in Manila. Ford told me that almost 95% of the people stood when he asked that third question. Genesis 2 has 2 commandments and 2 institutions that preceded the fall of man. The first is in Genesis 2:24, it's marriage. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, etc. The second is to work in Genesis 2:15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. My task in just a couple minutes is to give a testimony of the, so to speak, confessions of a workplace Christian or believer. And the way I would describe my journey, first of all, was a combination of a guilt trip and a fear trip. And here's how it came about. One of my dearest friends, a pastor, every time he gave the gospel, every sermon, but almost every time he gave a call for someone to surrender to the mission field. And that meant giving up one's career and going to the mission field. And I remember talking to him. I said, I feel guilty every time you talk. Now, I was 23. He was 60. That was kind of a stupid thing to say. But I said, it doesn't sound right. The second thing happened to me when another friend who was in a full-time Christian ministry said, Jerry, When are you going to stop playing around and give your life to something that really counts? And I was leading several hundred cadets at the United States Air Force Academy to Christ. And I said, I am giving myself to something that counts. But he meant if you don't come full-time, you somehow are not giving your life. So it led me to guilt, but also to fear that if I was really committed to Christ, the only way I could demonstrate it was to do what? Surrender, to go to the mission field or to be a pastor or something. No one except the man who led me to Christ modeled this idea of being in the workplace. And then in Colossians 3:15 it says, make the most of every opportunity. And I soon learned that that was in my workplace. And then I found that if I was going to have a witness in the workplace, finally, I would have to commit to that network of people that I worked with every day and to develop the network, and in a large sense, to just show up at the parties, the sports events, the family events, and where the people I worked with lived, and then to keep touch with the people of my past. Frankly, as a young believer in the workplace, I felt second class. Now, what is the way out? The way out for me was to understand that there is a calling to the workplace. For instance, I believe I was called to the United States Air Force, and still am in many, many ways. And I maintain my networks there. The second thing was, how can I do it? It wasn't by learning an evangelistic method, but it was my presence to be there, to be competent in the context of what I did. The third thing is I realized as a layman I had as much responsibility to go deep into the scriptures as any pastor did. And so I was helped to do that. And the fourth thing that I found that I had to do was I had to think long term. That is, my witness wasn't going to be who came to faith tomorrow, but who came to faith later. The co-author of a text I wrote finally came to faith at age 83 in just the last few years. And the last thing is I had to fight the idea that I had to do it all and to be everything, but rather that I had to be a person in the marketplace who lived the life of Christ, who was competent in what I did, who shared my faith as God gave opportunity and used it as the place of my personal mission field. And that got me out of both the guilt trip and the fear trip. Thank you very much.